It all started unexpectedly when a strange woman approached a college student petting cats. And he was left stunned wondering why such a beautiful person would talk to a friendless loner like him, while being even more shocked that she knew about his secret daily cat petting spot. As he asked if she was also there for the cats, but she simply handed him a ticket called a special offer, which he saw was an Ice Guy reincarnation ticket. And the mysterious woman just said she would see him soon before disappearing. Then suddenly he was falling through a dark empty void, completely bewildered, as his senses faded and he began to hear the sound of a baby crying, only to realize with a jolt that the crying was his own as someone called out to Prince Rufus. And he understood he had been reborn in another world. A fantasy world called Moonguard, where he was now Rufus Elidoria, the third prince, which was the so-called special offer. So as he grew, he pretended to be a normal baby to hide his adult consciousness from the maids. And he grew up strong until his 7th birthday, when he would participate in the skill inheritance ceremony, when his big brothers approached and asked if he was nervous for the big event, introducing themselves as Gilliam the first prince and Leonard the second prince of Elidoria, who reassured him that they were just as nervous when it was their turn. Then they walked him towards the ceremony hall as he shuffled along shyly, and he reached for the glowing crystal on the altar, feeling like he was at a school open house with his father the king watching intently, as a priest officially called Prince Rufus Elidoria forward to place his hand on the crystal. He then touched the orb, his face filled with awe and anticipation, and the priest announced that Rufus had awakened the summoning skill, leaving Rufus to wonder why everyone reacted so strongly to what he thought was just summoning magic, as he imagined summoning terrifying creatures and huge monsters. But then he doubted his ability to control such a powerful beast even if he could summon one, deciding he would much rather be a tamer surrounded by fluffy creatures anyway. Just as his brother approached telling him he had acquired a very rare skill. So Rufus asked what the summoning skill actually was, and was told to visit the Summoners Guild for more details, since very few people in the country have that skill. In fact, his brother believed there were only 2 members in the entire summoning guild, where upon arrival they were immediately greeted by a man named Balt, who introduced them to Selbus Tion, the head of the guild, and a little girl named Lala, making Rufus realize there truly were only 2 of them. And getting straight to business, he asked Selbus to explain the skill, who then led him to the guild's library, which was a very small room with only a couple of bookshelves, causing Rufus to think that calling it a library was quite an exaggeration. Then Selbus handed him a book that looked like an encyclopedia, and explained that what he could summon was neither an animal nor a monster, as he imagined summoning a giant fluffy beast with a gem on its forehead that towered over him. And the vision was so intense that Balt had to catch him as he nearly collapsed. Then Rufus looked at his shaking hands, realizing he was drained and summoning multiple times would be difficult, while Lala was completely frozen in shock on the floor, which was an understandable reaction. So Rufus just stood there a bit stunned himself, and the massive creature spoke, complaining that the room was too cramped and asked to break down a wall, which made Rufus exclaim in shock that the creature could talk. So he nervously asked if it could get a bit smaller, but the creature called it an unreasonable request. Then it agreed, but only on the condition that Rufus give it a name, which surprised him, as the creature explained that with a name it would become exclusively his and could freely change its size on command. Realizing this meant he could keep it like a pet, he excitedly named the creature Ragios, who happily accepted the name, while a little bird named Peep also appeared. And Rufus immediately asked Ragios if it could shrink down to the same size as Peep, a thought that filled him with so much joy his eyes sparkled and he started drooling. Then he watched in absolute delight as Ragios transformed into an adorable puppy-sized ball of fluff. While Ragios apologized for this being its size limit, Rufus was too busy melting in a sea of fluffy bliss to care. And when Ragios felt it had failed and should disappear, Rufus quickly told it to wait, reassuring his new companion that the puppy size was absolutely perfect. Then he lovingly scooped up the fluffy Ragios, who told him he never needed to ask for permission to do so, causing Rufus to feel like he was ascending to heaven from pure bliss, while Selbus looked on with grave concern, as Selbus declared that they must immediately report this unrecorded magical creature that speaks human language to the king. So they rushed back to the palace, looking utterly bewildered by the sudden turn of events, where Rufus burst into the throne room announcing an emergency to his father, and the king looked down from his throne demanding to know what was happening. Then Rufus proudly presented his new friend, introducing Ragios, a Di's white feathered dragon, while the king stared in disbelief as Rufus also introduced Peep, a burden perched on his shoulder. And when Rufus prompted them to say hello to his father, Ragios transformed back to its giant size and threatened to show no mercy if the king harmed his master, leaving the king terrified. So the overwhelmed king demanded Rufus explain everything from the very beginning, as he tried to process the fact that his son had summoned magical creatures that were completely unknown. And when the king asked how he summoned a dragon, Rufus explained that he just imagined it, which baffled the king even more. Then Ragios let out another roar, making the king scream in terror again, leaving Rufus standing alone in the throne room after the chaotic meeting had ended. And the king, looking utterly defeated, appointed Rufus as the new guild master while Ragios playfully bit his head. A decision that shocked Rufus, but Selbus explained he had already agreed to become the vice guild master. As the king elaborated that since Ragios is such a precious and unknown being, Rufus's new duty is to research it. And from now on he must continue to responsibly report on any magical creatures he summons. So the still-shaken king pleaded with Rufus to tell Lord Ragios that he means no harm, which left Rufus reflecting on how serious things had become, though he was thrilled to have permission to keep his new friends, especially since the custom of keeping pets didn't even exist in this world, which meant he could now legally create the fluffy paradise of his dreams, a thought that nearly made him faint with joy until his mother appeared, who asked if he was done with his report to the king. Then she looked down and curiously asked what the little creatures in his arms were. So Rufus happily introduced Ragios, the red ice white feather dragon, and Peep the burden. But his mother just stared in shock, barely able to say the word dragon, before she suddenly fainted right in front of him, leaving Rufus to guess that the shock of seeing magical creatures for the first time was too much for her. Then, as he stood by her bedside, someone called out his name, and his two older brothers Gilliam and Leonard rushed in, explaining the king told them about the incredible magical creatures. So Gilliam the scholar got incredibly excited and asked if he could touch them. And while he gently pet Ragios, who looked annoyed, Leonard cautiously asked if they were safe. Rufus then had to ask his brother to stop, as Ragios was clearly getting irritated by all the petting. But Gilliam was completely fascinated and insisted Rufus tell him everything later. And after an exhausting day, Rufus wished his sleeping companions good night. Then, as he drifted off to sleep, a mysterious figure appeared in his room, and he suddenly woke up, rubbing his eyes in a strange white void, where he found himself standing before the mysterious woman from the day he was reincarnated, who revealed herself to be Moonguard, the creator god of this world. She then explained that she was the one who brought his dying soul from Earth to her world, and when he asked why, she told him that from now on, his mission was to massively boost the recognition of the summoning skill, leaving Rufus utterly confused by her strange request, as the creator god declared that they would now seriously boost the popularity of the summoning skill, leaving Rufus to wonder what she meant by seriously boost. And when she asked if he would accept the task, he panicked, demanding a proper explanation. So the slightly annoyed god sighed and agreed to explain after a cute flower creature popped up. Then the scene suddenly shifted to a classroom where a teacher version of the gods stood before a whiteboard, leaving Rufus completely shocked by the bizarre change. As the teacher god began her lesson, explaining that the summoning skill is incredibly important to Moonguard, she drew a diagram showing that used mana in their world disappears forever, and the summoning skill is the only way to replenish it. Then a doodle of a cat demonstrated that summoned creatures act as conduits to bring new mana into the world, leaving Rufus to stare in utter confusion at the strange and childish presentation. And the teacher god continued, explaining that because the skill is so rare, almost no one knows its true world-saving purpose. Then she hit the whiteboard with a pointer, confirming he was following along, as she revealed that he inherited the skill because of his intense love for animals, since people are granted skills based on their deepest desires. And she chose him from Earth specifically because she heard Earthlings have incredible imaginations. Then she casually added that inheriting a skill also grants the ability to use magic, which made Rufus gasp in shock. And he became incredibly excited about the prospect of using attack, healing, and daily life magic. But the teacher god quickly brought him back to the main topic. So he asked why she couldn't just send mana to the world herself, since she's a god. And she illustrated that doing so would cause catastrophic disasters that would completely destroy Moonguard. Because while she loves her world and its people, if the mana ever dries up, it will become uninhabitable. Which is why she needs his powerful imagination and love for animals to spread the skill and use it as much as possible. So Rufus enthusiastically accepted the mission, promising he was the man for the job. And the creator god gave a gentle smile, as she told him she was glad she chose him and was counting on him to succeed. Then as she vanished he wondered why the whole scene felt so strangely familiar. And he suddenly found himself falling through the void again before waking up with a jolt in his own bed, where he sat up looking exhausted and confused by the strange dream. But as he wondered if it was real, Ragios spoke from beside him, confirming it was not a dream, and delivered a message from the creator god to not forget his promise. Then Rufus realized Peep was gone, and Ragios explained the little bird had already returned, and that since Ragios was ordered to be his body, Rufus could simply summon Peep back anytime. So he did just that, and Peep appeared with a cheerful greeting, happy to be back. Then Rufus announced that his plan for the day was to introduce his new friends to everyone. As the scene shifted to the castle's training grounds where knights were sparring, and Rufus arrived with his companions wanting to show them off to all the knights. While the knights murmured about how cute Rufus was and Ragios worried it was the wrong kind of attention. Then his brother Leonard arrived, patting his head and praising him for his hard work, while reminiscing about how even their scholarly brother Gilliam had to train hard to become a skilled fighter. And right on cue, Gilliam appeared wanting to hear the fun story Leonard was telling. So Rufus took the opportunity to ask Gilliam if inheriting a skill really means you can use magic, explaining that he wanted to find out what kind of magic he was capable of using. So Gilliam suggested they use the spacious training grounds to test it out since he hadn't learned about it at the guild, and decided they should start with a simple, light spell, explaining that it's a basic spell perfect for practice since anyone can use it. Then Rufus eagerly held out his hand and shouted the spell's name. But absolutely nothing happened. So he tried again, completely confused, while Gilliam also wondered why it wasn't working. And after Gilliam advised him to focus his mana, he tried one last time. But when that failed too, he begged his brother to teach him other spells, which Gilliam refused, leaving Rufus completely dejected after every single spell failed, wondering if his magic career was already over. So he rushed back to the Summoners Guild to see Selbus and Lala, where he told them he had an urgent question for them, and asked what kind of magic he could use with his summoning skill. But Selbus and Lala just looked at each other grimly. Then Selbus broke the news that the summoning skill doesn't allow its user to cast any magic spells at all. And back at the palace, a heartbroken Rufus moped while Gilliam tried to cheer him up. But then he suddenly burst into maniacal laughter with a new idea that terrified Selbus and Lala, as he declared that if he can't use magic himself, he'll just have his summoned creatures use it for him, realizing that to create fire he just needed to summon a creature that could breathe fire. Then he remembered the perfect creature from the encyclopedia, and confidently shouted, "Summon, salamander," as a cloud of smoke billowed out before him, and a small, adorable lizard-like creature with a flame on its head appeared, asking if he had been called, which made Rufus completely lose it as he was overwhelmed by a whole new level of cuteness. Then Lala nervously asked if the creature was hot, but the salamander explained it wasn't in attack mode. So Rufus asked it to try burning a piece of paper he held out in a bowl, and the tiny creature unleashed an incredibly powerful blast of fire that amazed him, making him praise the amazing salamander for its power, as he realized with glee that this was the magic of the summoning skill and he could use magic through his summons, which left Selbus completely impressed by the new guild master's ingenuity. And he admitted that he had never considered the true possibilities of the skill before. So Rufus told them both to raise their heads and join him in showing the world how useful the summoning skill truly is. Then he officially named the salamander Kien, who happily accepted its new name. And since he still had plenty of power left, he decided to test Kien's fire strength even more, jokingly suggesting they should burn down the castle just for fun. But unfortunately his parents walked in at that exact moment, and his mother stared in horror, demanding to know what he just said as Rufus began to panic, as his mother sternly demanded to know the meaning of his actions. And he panicked, thinking the training ground had suddenly become a battlefield with her arrival. Then she looked down at the new creature and asked who this child was. So he nervously introduced Kian the salamander, which made his mother's eyes widen in shock. And she gasped, "A lizard," before fainting yet again as Rufus cried out her name. Then Leonard helped the queen up, who explained it was just too much stimulation, while the king told a worried Rufus it was okay. But after recovering, she apologized and asked Rufus to properly introduce her to his children, explaining that she'd been curious about them since they couldn't talk properly the day before. So Rufus told his summons to introduce themselves, and Kian, Peep, and Ragios all proudly stated their names, which amazed his mother, who then asked if she could touch them, and Ragios reluctantly agreed to endure it just for her. So she gently pet Ragios's head, marveling at how fluffy he was. And then she held Kian, telling him he had a cute face and apologizing for being startled earlier, before smiling warmly and asking them all to please take care of her son, leaving Rufus stunned and touched that she really just came to say hello. But back at the guild, Lala was completely terrified of Kian, and Rufus wondered if she had a fear of salamanders. He then thought about how convenient it would be for her to have a fire-type creature for herself. So while Lala was busy studying with Peep's help, he wondered if a bird-type creature might be a better fit for her. And placing his hand on the book, he began a new summoning for a firebird, which manifested as an impossibly round and adorable bird that let out a tiny chirp, making Rufus clutch his chest as he was completely overwhelmed by its cuteness. As he thought about how its charm was totally different from Peep's but still so incredibly cute. And when the new bird puffed out a tiny flame, he declared that fluffy creatures are truly geniuses as Lala watched with wide eyes. Then he presented the new summon to her, asking what she thought of this one, introducing the little creature as Okan, a firebird. And Lala was immediately smitten, blushing as she looked at the cute bird, as she gently held Okan in her hands, thinking she might be able to summon one just like it herself. Meanwhile, Rufus found Selbus in the library, who was busy with a new project. And Selbus explained that with so many new creatures appearing, he thought they would need an illustrated guide for their reports, which Rufus thought was a great idea until he saw Selbus's very simplistic drawing. So he turned to Balt and asked if he was any good at drawing. But Balt firmly stated that he couldn't draw at all. Then Rufus glanced at Lala, who was happily drawing, and with a sinister grin decided he would have to do it himself. However, his own attempt was a childish doodle that made Kian exclaim how terrible it was. And when Selbus suggested hiring a court painter, Rufus found the idea frustrating and suddenly had a better idea, as he shouted, "Manifest, Art Bear!" And a cloud of smoke filled the room, which slowly cleared to reveal a large round shadow. And a giant fluffy white bear appeared, which Rufus immediately hugged, exclaiming how soft it was. He then named the new creature Beard and told it to get ready, as he wanted to see its power in action. So he asked Beard to draw Ragios, and the bear immediately started scribbling on a notepad. Then it revealed a masterpiece, a stunningly realistic portrait of Ragios that left Rufus and Selbus speechless at its incredible speed and quality. And when Lala asked if it could draw in other styles, it quickly sketched a beautiful shoujo manga-style portrait of her, just as the king and his attendants arrived, having heard about the new summons. And the king looked completely overwhelmed, remarking on how the numbers had grown quite a bit. So Rufus tried to get his companions to greet his father, but the king yelled for them to stay right where they were, telling Rufus to just keep quiet for a while and admitting that he doesn't really dislike them that much, which left Rufus with some unexpected free time, so he decided to give everyone a tour of the castle, though he worried that such a strange group walking together would stand out too much. But he was tired of just sitting around in his room doing nothing, and he suddenly remembered his brother Leonard telling him about exploring the castle's basement, which sparked a fierce internal debate among different versions of himself, as his cautious side argued against it while his adventurous sides dreamed of treasure and new discoveries. And his adventurous self ultimately won, questioning if he really wanted to live an unadventurous life after being reincarnated. So after a painful mental battle, the conclusion was reached, and he announced to his companions that they were going to the basement. He then explained that it was located in a section only royalty could enter behind an old-fashioned black door, which they soon found a large ornate door covered in vines at the end of a long hallway. And he hummed with excitement, wondering what kind of adventure was waiting for them inside. But as the door creaked open, it revealed a terrifying headless horseman, making Rufus realize things had just gotten extremely serious, as the king's voice echoed in his mind, telling him to stay quiet for a while. Rufus looked at the headless knight and realized they were in big trouble now, because they definitely couldn't stay quiet. Then he remembered back a few hours ago when he first entered the dark and musty basement with Ragios. And while Ragios warned him to watch his step, Rufus was confident the dark wouldn't be a problem, because he had Kian's fire to light the way, as the little salamander's flame lit up a candlestick like magic, illuminating the long stone corridor ahead of them. Then, after walking for what felt like forever, Rufus noted that there was nothing there, even though his brother Leonard had seemed so serious about the place. When suddenly he heard a click and turned to see a large metal gate had slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside as Ragios cried out his name. And before he could react, something charged at him from the darkness, as the terrifying Dullahan on its spectral horse galloped towards him, letting out a bone-chilling cry. and he was thrown backward by the sheer force of its presence. He then stared in shock at the headless armor, realizing a Dullahan was guarding the basement, which made a twisted kind of sense for a secret royal passage. So he figured that since there was another door up ahead, this must be some kind of defense mechanism that had been activated. But that didn't stop him from wanting to run home as the Dullahan's horse reared up with a terrifying neigh. Then it charged forward again at full speed. And just as it was about to strike, Rufus was knocked to the floor. But the blow never landed because his brother Leonard appeared out of nowhere, blocking the attack and asking what kind of fun he was having. Then Gilliam appeared as well, scolding him for not inviting his brothers along for the adventure. And Rufus was overjoyed to see them as Gilliam checked if he was okay. His brothers then explained that the basement was full of traps and he couldn't get out easily now that the defense system was active. And Leonard warned him with a grin that they would all be in big trouble if their father found out about their little excursion. Then he turned to face the Dullahan and greeted it like an old friend before preparing to fight, which surprised Rufus, who learned that Leonard had fought this very same creature when he was just a child. And while it gave him a lot of trouble back then, he was much stronger now. So he dashed forward in a blur of motion, his sword moving too fast for the eye to see, leaving Rufus completely stunned that he couldn't even follow the attack, as Leonard laughed at how much weaker the Dullahan seemed now. And after the creature was defeated, a new door creaked open as his brothers marveled at the power of the sword saint's skill. But their adventure wasn't over yet, as a group of gargoyles appeared and Gilliam stepped forward, eager for his own chance to show off to his little brother. And with a single powerful blast of magic, the gargoyle was instantly roasted to a crisp, leaving Gilliam a bit disappointed. Then, as his brothers congratulated each other, Rufus felt a pang of sadness, realizing he was always being protected because his own power couldn't even begin to compare to theirs, as they headed towards the final room, where he followed behind them, feeling small and useless. And he was horrified to see that this time they had to face both the Dullahan and the gargoyles at once. But his brothers just patted him on the head, telling him that there are times a man must fight and encouraging him to take the lead. So he protested that he couldn't use swords or magic, but they just reassured him it was okay because he was their little brother, which Ragios found unreasonable. Then Ragios stepped forward, declaring that his summons could fight just as well as his brothers, and asked for his command. And with renewed confidence, Rufus cleared his throat and prepared to give his orders, as he pointed dramatically and shouted for Ragios to go, who confidently replied, "As you wish." Then Ragios simply poked the stone floor with its paw, and the mighty Dullahan immediately disintegrated into a cloud of black dust, leaving Rufus and his brothers completely speechless. But as more monsters appeared, Rufus commanded Beard and Kian to join the fray because that wasn't even a proper warm-up for Ragios. And his brothers watched in utter amazement as his summons unleashed a devastating coordinated attack that easily wiped out the remaining monsters. Then Beard proudly announced that the battle was finished, and Rufus congratulated his team on a job well done, leaving Leonard to mutter in disbelief that he didn't even do that much damage when he was down here. And as the victorious group stood before the final gate, it slowly rumbled open, revealing a brightly lit room that made Rufus squint his eyes, which turned out to be a large empty open space, except for a single stone pedestal standing in the very center. Then Rufus noticed Gilliam was bleeding from the fight, but his brother brushed it off, saying it would heal quickly, and pointed out that his blood had dripped onto the pedestal, activating a hidden mechanism. And as the pedestal glowed, a section of the wall rumbled and slid open, revealing a secret passage, which was a fascinating sight to behold, as Gilliam explained that the mechanism only reacts to royal blood, which is why only the royal family could enter this area, and told Rufus that he would have to go inside to see what was hidden there. So he stepped through the opening and found himself in a massive vault filled with mountains of gold and treasure. And he stared in awe, realizing that the legends of a hidden treasure vault were actually true. But his brothers explained that the basement was built to be a sturdy emergency shelter, and this vault was actually used to store emergency supplies, which all family members learn about eventually. Then, as Rufus wondered if they were told this secret when they inherited their skills, Ragios suddenly grew alert, sensing a strong companion on the other side of the far wall. And Rufus wondered if it could be another powerful magical creature. So his brothers knocked on the wall and confirmed there was a space beyond it, but even Leonard's strength couldn't break through. But when Rufus placed his hand on the wall, it began to glow and phase away as if inviting him in. Then a deep voice boomed from within, asking who dared to disturb its slumber, which made Rufus jump back in fright, as the wall transformed into a large stone sarcophagus, which then crumbled away, revealing a tiny box-like creature that left Rufus completely bewildered. as Rufus gulped nervously at the booming voice asking who dared to disturb its slumber. He then cautiously approached the strange box-like creature that had appeared from the wall. And suddenly his brothers burst out laughing, which left him completely confused. As the little box chirped, "Just kidding," and Leonard admitted he'd always wanted to try a dramatic entrance like that. But then his brothers got suspicious, calling it a talking trap box, and threatened to dismantle it, which made the box panic and insist it wasn't a bad trap box. So Rufus gently asked if it had been here all alone this whole time, and the box confirmed it had, explaining that it had been waiting for a new master this whole time, which surprised Rufus, as it formally asked if he would become its new master, which left him speechless. He then clarified that it meant contractor, and the box confirmed that's what it meant. So he asked how one becomes its master, and it explained that whoever gives it a name becomes its master, which made his brothers immediately start shouting random names. Then Rufus turned to Ragios and asked if it was possible to make another person's summoned creature your own. And Ragios explained that it's only possible if the original summoner is no longer in this world, which made Rufus look at the little box with a sad expression, realizing it had probably been alone down here for a very long time after its master had passed away. So after his brothers ran out of name ideas, he asked if he could be the one to name it, and the box eagerly agreed, telling him to please do so. He then asked if it had really been waiting for someone to come this entire time, and the box confirmed it had, explaining that it was so bored it had spent its time thinking up the perfect greeting for the next person it met, which is what led to the dramatic entrance earlier. So since it was a trap box, Rufus started suggesting names like Toragoro and Torasuk, which the box found problematic in various ways. Then he finally settled on the name Torachan, and asked the little box how it liked that name, which made the box start glowing brightly with happiness, as everyone watched in amazement. And with a flash of light, the box announced that the master re-registration was complete. Then it declared that from now on it was his loyal servant, which made Rufus blush and stammer, as his brothers teased him about why he named it that. But he insisted that magical creatures are friends and Torachan is a friend too, which seemed to make the little box very happy. And as it wiggled with joy, Rufus marveled at the endless possibilities of his summoning skill, realizing he could even summon non-animal creatures like robots. Then as they left the vault, Leonard remarked that he never knew a hidden room like this existed, and Gilliam wondered if Torachan had some kind of secret. So Gilliam asked what was inside the box, and it replied that there were lots of things inside. And after Leonard gave it the cold shoulder since he wasn't its master, Rufus happily asked Torachan to show them what was inside. Then the box opened its lid and pulled out a terrifying spiked mace and a baseball bat covered in nails, followed by a slipper and a variety of other strange objects, leaving Rufus and his brothers completely shocked by the bizarre contents. And as the box continued to pull out strange weapons from its seemingly endless four-dimensional space, Leonard wondered if they were even weapons at all, since he'd never seen anything like them before, which made Torachan proudly declare that it had better stuff than their treasure vault and they could praise it more. Then Rufus picked up a strange-looking handle that seemed familiar somehow, and a beam of light shot out from it, creating a lightsaber. He then explained to his confused brothers that it was a weapon from a galaxy far, far away a long time ago, but quickly put it away, realizing he almost broke the world building, and suggested they look at more normal weapons instead. So he picked up a massive greatsword and struggled to lift the huge old-fashioned weapon. Then he declared that he wanted to try swinging it, but his brothers told him to wait, as he struggled to even hold the heavy sword upright. And with a mighty yell, he swung it with all his might, creating a powerful shockwave that completely shattered the stone wall behind him, leaving him and his brothers staring in stunned silence, as the dust settled, revealing the massive hole he had created. And he looked down at his hands in disbelief, wondering what had just happened. But his brothers were more worried about the castle wall he had just destroyed. Then Leonard, who had never seen anything like this before, asked if Rufus knew what the sword was. And with a shocked expression, Rufus realized he was holding the legendary holy sword Excalibur, leaving him to wonder if he had really just picked up a holy sword from a talking treasure chest in the basement. As his brothers marveled at the unmistakable radiance of the holy sword Excalibur, and Leonard was so overcome with emotion that he started nuzzling the sword, which made Rufus wonder if he looked that silly when he fawned over his summons. Then Leonard suddenly asked if he could have the sword, and Gilliam immediately told him to back off. But Rufus agreed, saying it would be wasted on him anyway, and his brother hugged him in gratitude. So Gilliam had to pull a pouting Leonard away from his little brother as they decided to leave the now wrecked basement. And as they walked out, Rufus breathed a sigh of relief, But Leonard suggested they keep the treasure vault a secret for now, and Rufus wondered what he was plotting. Then their father suddenly appeared looking furious, which made all three brothers jump in shock, as he revealed that he knew everything because he felt the tremor from Rufus swinging the sword. And before anyone could explain, Leonard proudly showed their father the legendary sword, excitedly pointing out the incredible radiance of the holy sword Excalibur, which made both Rufus and Gilliam facepalm at their brother's complete lack of awareness, as their father looked on with a bemused expression. Then with a sinister smile he summoned them all to his office to hear the full story, where they were thoroughly lectured for their little adventure. And Rufus explained that Torachan was a trap box that an ancestor with the summoning skill had summoned long ago. So the king asked if Lord Torachan could produce other legendary weapons as well. And Rufus decided to test that theory, asking Torachan for the magic sword Durandal, which it immediately produced. Then he asked for the holy spear Gungnir, which it also had. And finally the magic spear Longinus, which to his amazement it also possessed, making Rufus giggle with glee at the realization that Torachan really did have everything, while Gilliam told him to not just say, "So he says." And the king used his appraisal skill to confirm that the sword was indeed the real Excalibur. Then he reminded them all that entering the basement without permission was strictly forbidden. But since what's done is done, he decided an appropriate punishment was in order. So he assigned Gilliam and Leonard the monumental task of creating a complete weapon catalog of Torachan's entire arsenal, which made Gilliam groan in despair. And Rufus's job was to use that catalog to check if Torachan had the corresponding weapons. Then the king ordered Leonard to return Excalibur to Torachan, which made him cry out in disappointment. And the next day, Rufus and his companions arrived at the salon his father had designated for their work, feeling guilty that his brothers had gotten roped into his punishment as well, when he suddenly heard his brother Leonard sobbing from inside the room. And he peeked in to see him completely passed out on a massive pile of paperwork, as Leonard muttered in his sleep that he was a strong man and would never give up on the endless desk work, which made Rufus feel incredibly guilty for getting him into this mess. Then he heard Gilliam crying out that he had wanted to do all of it himself, which left Rufus completely speechless at his brother's strange priorities, as he witnessed a scene of pure chaos with Gilliam trying to pry Excalibur from Leonard's hands while Leonard was still asleep and Torachan just sat there looking bored. And he realized that their father had cleverly arranged the punishment so that the studious Gilliam would see it as a reward, while the adventure-loving Leonard would be tormented by not being allowed to participate. Sounds of great effort fill the room. Leonard proudly announces he's finished his task, and Rufus thanks his brother for the hard work. Gilliam immediately throws a tantrum, screaming that he wanted to be the one to do it. Finding the tense atmosphere unbearable, Rufus decides it's time for him and his companions to leave. He thanks Beard for helping carry the heavy documents and says it can return whenever it pleases, to which the creature replies it was a simple task. With a heavy thud, Rufus places the massive stack of papers down on a desk. He immediately calls forth Torachan, who appears from a cloud of smoke with a cheerful greeting. Rufus explains the new task, telling the box he will read weapon names from the list and Torachan must confirm if it contains them. He asks Torachan if it's okay to check its contents once more, and the box enthusiastically agrees. He begins reading from the list, calling out Arondite and Georges, while Torachan confirms it possesses both legendary weapons. A quiet moment passes in the vast library as the sheer scale of the task ahead sinks in. Nearby, his companion Ragios sleeps peacefully. After some time, Rufus lets out a sigh, realizing he's only managed to get through the first few pages of the enormous catalog. He looks up from his work, pausing as a thought begins to form. He turns to Torachan and asks if it contains anything besides weapons and armor. The box confirms that it does, suggesting magic tools, as an example, which immediately piques Rufus's curiosity. Intrigued, Rufus asks Torachan to show him one of these tools, and it readily agrees, opening its lid with a pop. A strange white cube with a black circle in the center emerges from within the box's depths. Rufus holds the mysterious white cube, wondering what it could be before pressing a button on its surface. A powerful gust of wind suddenly blasts him in the face, making him cry out in surprise. He examines the object more closely, identifying it as a blower box, and noticing an emerald inside that he guesses is its power source. He asks if it is some kind of fan, and Torachan's voice confirms that it is indeed a blower box. Curiosity taking over, he asks what other kinds of items Torachan has hidden away inside. He pulls out a small bottle and inspects the label, questioning what nectar could be. Tora-chan begins tossing out more items, including bottles of nectar and muscle energy, which Rufus scrambles to catch. A dark realization dawns on him as he recognizes these as items that should not exist in this world. He recalls from the memories of his past life that nectar was a powerful revival potion, a fact Tora-chan cheerfully confirms. Panicked by the implications, Rufus quickly tells Tora-chan to put all of the potions away immediately. His mind races to a terrifying new possibility as he wonders if Tora-chan also contains weapons of mass destruction. Tora-chan begins rummaging inside itself again, searching for other things it can show its master. Rufus desperately pleads with the box, begging it not to bring out anything like that. The mere thought of what the box might contain is so overwhelming that he collapses to the floor, panting with exhaustion and fear. He finds himself wondering about the ancestor who originally summoned Tora-chan, questioning what era they could possibly have been from. Lying on the floor, he realizes that everything Tora-chan contains is from a different time, items that simply don't exist in the present day. He speculates that if the items inside the box truly are from an ancient civilization, it could change everything he knows about the world's history. He recalls a history lesson about a great war that took place long ago, where gods and demons fought until they effectively wiped each other out, disappearing from the earth. He distinctly remembers learning about this in his studies. According to the history books, after the gods fell, the remaining humans used weapons the gods had created to finish off the demon race. This was only possible because the gods, facing defeat, had armed humanity and made them their allies in the conflict. He turns to the lounging Ragios and asks if demons still exist somewhere in the world. He trails off, lost in thought as he considers the dangerous implications of this forgotten history. Ragios boasts confidently that even if demons did still exist, they would be no match for its overwhelming power. Rufus asks if Ragios knows for sure, realizing that even his most powerful companion is uncertain about the ancient past. Ragios sharply snaps him out of his thoughts, chiding him for stopping his work on the catalog and asking if he ever plans on finishing it. Just then, his father's voice cuts in from the doorway, asking Rufus how his progress is coming along. Startled, Rufus quickly insists that he is indeed working on it. He stands and formally reports to his father that the cataloging work is proceeding without any issues. He stands before his father, addressing him respectfully. Rufus reports that based on the first few pages he's checked, every single weapon listed has been present inside Tora-chan, a fact that surprises the king. The king acknowledges the monumental size of the task and tells Rufus to just check a few items from each page from now on to save time. Rufus agrees, and his father gives him a stern reminder not to take any of the items outside of the room under any circumstances. As he leaves, the king muses to himself, shocked that a single summoned creature could contain a trove of weapons that were thought to be mere legends. The day draws to a close outside the castle walls. The king turns back one last time and sharply asks if Rufus has taken anything out, and Rufus quickly reassures him that of course he has not. Finally finished with the day's work, Rufus collapses onto his desk in utter exhaustion, while Peep flutters above him with a tiny banner that reads, "Cheering you on." He complains about how tiring it is to do desk work all day, especially for someone who is still in a child's body. He idly thinks to himself that he would much rather soak in a proper hot spring than just take a regular bath. Though he desperately wants a bath, he is so exhausted from the day's work that he feels he can't move a single step. He then has a sudden realization. He doesn't yet have a water-based magical creature in his collection. He wonders if hot spring culture even exists in this world, picturing capybaras blissfully soaking in the warm water. An idea suddenly sparks in his mind, a chain reaction of logic connecting water and fire to create the hot water he desires. He stands up with newfound energy and asks Ragios if there is a footbath-sized bucket anywhere nearby, and his companion questions what he's planning. With a determined look, Rufus stands with his hand outstretched, preparing to summon a new creature. He shouts the command to manifest the water spirit, Undine. A beautiful and elegant water spirit appears before him in a swirl of mist, asking if she was the one he called for. Holding a small wooden bucket, Rufus explains that he wants to fill it with water to create a makeshift hot spring. Undine smiles and confirms that she can certainly produce water for him. She then surprises him by stating that she can do better and create an actual hot spring for him. Undine confidently states that she can create a hot spring. Rufus stares back in utter shock, questioning if she's being serious. He asks for confirmation, and the spirit formally introduces herself as Aqua the Undine, addressing him as her master. Aqua then asks to borrow the wooden bucket he is holding, and he dazedly agrees. She takes the empty bucket from his hands. With a look of concentration, Aqua holds the bucket and begins to use her power. Small bubbles immediately begin to rise from the bottom of the pail. Rufus cautiously crouches down to inspect the water, which is now steaming. He tentatively dips his bare foot into the bucket. Aqua gently tells him to immerse his feet and try it out. A wave of pure bliss washes over Rufus's face as the warmth soaks into him. He exclaims that the feeling is incredible, noting that all the exhaustion from his body is melting away as Aqua asks if he is pleased with the result. Aqua explains that it is a genuine, free-flowing hot spring with properties that relieve fatigue, stiff shoulders, and back pain, as well as beautify the skin, making Rufus realize its true value. Ragios observes that the effects seem genuine, pointing out that Rufus's skin is now glowing. Rufus feels his entire body has become lighter, and Ragios dips a paw in, noting that his own fur has become smooth. He thinks to himself that he would love to try this out in a much larger bath. Ragios remarks that the beautifying effect is a mysterious power, revealing that this is its first time experiencing a hot spring. Rufus laments that if only he had a proper bathtub in his room, he could enjoy this all the time. The phrase, beautifying the skin, suddenly catches his attention. His mother appears from the shadows, asking him with a sweet smile to tell her more about this wonderful effect. She eagerly presses him for details about what he said regarding beautiful skin. Rufus formally introduces his new companion as Aqua the Undine, who politely greets the queen for the first time. The queen looks at the water spirit with great interest. Rufus explains that Aqua possesses the ability to create hot spring water that has powerful skin-beautifying effects. The queen remarks that Rufus certainly summons a variety of strange and wonderful children, and asks if she may touch Aqua. With her eyes sparkling with excitement, the queen asks what a hot spring is, and Rufus explains that it's a special kind of bath. She immediately grabs Rufus by the arm and declares that they are going to try it out right away. She excitedly lists off the other benefits, such as relieving fatigue and shoulder pain, and insists that they must test it immediately. They arrive at the large, magnificent bathhouse located within the castle. The queen reveals she has already had the staff drain the existing bathwater in preparation and eagerly tells Rufus to have Aqua begin. Rufus notes his mother's intense enthusiasm and asks Aqua if she can fill the massive tub, to which she confidently agrees. Aqua unleashes her power, and steam and water begin to fill the room. In an instant, the enormous, empty bath is filled to the brim with steaming hot spring water. Both Rufus and his mother stare in amazement at the sight before them. Rufus suddenly panics, asking his mother if he is also expected to get in. The answer is made clear without a word. His mother tells him to hurry up and get undressed, offering to help, but he flusteredly insists he can do it himself. She tells him it's perfectly natural since they are family and asks with a sad expression if he doesn't want to bathe with his own mother, leaving him no room to argue. Now submerged in the hot spring, a deeply embarrassed Rufus tries to ignore his mother, who is sighing with contentment at how wonderful the water feels. The queen touches her own cheek in amazement, exclaiming that her skin has truly become silky smooth. Rufus has to admit that he feels the same way, noticing that his own skin is now as smooth as a baby's. Aqua proudly confirms the effects as the women's excited chatter fills the bathhouse, much to Rufus's bemusement. Then an idea suddenly comes to him. He reflects that while his child's body doesn't suffer from aches and pains, the hot spring has completely washed away the fatigue from his long day of work. He wonders how the knights would react if he used Aqua's power to fill the large bathhouse of the Knights' Order with this water, thinking they would surely be overjoyed. His mother smiles warmly and remarks on how truly amazing hot springs are. As his mother continues to relax with a sigh of bliss, Rufus considers having his brothers try out the hot spring next. He is then struck by the realization that this world doesn't have hair dryers, and he finds himself wishing he could use wind magic to solve the problem. His mother agrees, mentioning that while she loves taking baths, drying her long hair afterward is always a difficult chore. The phrase, wind magic, sparks another brilliant idea in Rufus's mind. He suddenly jumps out of the water, startling his mother as he asks her to wait just a moment. Invoking his full name and title, Rufus Elidoria commands a new creature to manifest before him, a fairy. A beautiful, winged fairy appears in a flash of light and greets him with a cheerful and affectionate, "Hi, darling." Rufus introduces the newly summoned fairy as Tia and asks her to use her magic to dry his mother's hair. He tells his slightly stunned mother to hold still. Tia cheerfully agrees, calling Rufus darling and promising to make the queen's hair beautifully shiny. A gentle breeze begins to flow from the fairy's hands. Tia gracefully casts her spell, a soft light glowing around her. The magic gently envelopes the queen's long, wet hair, drying it instantly. The queen stares at her reflection, her eyes wide with amazement at the result. The maids gasp in admiration, exclaiming how beautiful, glossy, and vibrant her hair has become. A buzz of excitement and wonder ripples through the maids. The queen turns to Rufus, a pleased smile on her face as she tells him she likes it very much. She declares her love for both Aqua's hot spring and Tia's wind magic. She says with a blissful expression that she would love to experience both of them every single day. Rufus questions her, realizing the implication that he is now on call for daily spa treatments. He reflects on how he ended up accepting his mother's daily request as he stands before the doors of the Summoners Guild, having been commanded there in the name of Selbus Tion. Inside, Selbus looks on with an impressed expression as he holds a newly summoned creature. He summons forth a salamander of his own. Selbus exclaims that he has finally succeeded in summoning a salamander, giving all the credit to the guild master Rufus's excellent example. Rufus mentions that it appears Lala has also made some significant progress in her training. Lala stands before them, a small, round bird creature at her feet. With tears of joy streaming down her face, she proudly exclaims that she finally did it. She reports to the guild master that she has successfully summoned a firebird. She suddenly sways on her feet, looking faint from the extreme effort. Rufus reassures her that it's okay, realizing she must be drained after concentrating for so many hours. He praises Lala for her incredible accomplishment, and she thanks him shyly before nearly collapsing again. Rufus tells her that taking a break is also important, and Selbus suggests she step outside for some fresh air. Still dizzy, Lala mutters her determination to summon even more magical creatures as she stumbles towards the exit. She says she will be right back, leaving Rufus to worry if she will be all right on her own. As she pushes the door open, she bumps headfirst into an unexpected visitor. A guard immediately apologizes profusely to the visitor, addressing them as Her Highness the Queen. Rufus and Selbus are both startled by the Queen's sudden appearance at the guild. The Queen stands tall in the doorway, looking down at the dazed Lala who has fallen to her knees. The Queen correctly identifies Lala as a member of the Summoners Guild and asks about the dark circles under her eyes. She then turns to Rufus and requests that he prepare a bath for her. Lala explains that she has been training intensely in the art of summoning, which is why she is so exhausted. With a knowing smile, the Queen recalls that the special hot spring also has fatigue-recovering properties. Rufus and Lala look on, completely confused by her intentions. The Queen then warmly invites the bewildered Lala to join her for a relaxing bath. And so, a rumor of a miraculous hot spring began to spread quietly through a corner of the royal castle. The rumor first reached the ears of the nobles. Then it spread to the castle's many servants. It eventually reached all the way to the Knights of the Knights Order. And then, the rumor raced from person to person, growing in scale and number as it circulated throughout the entire castle. Eventually, the situation had grown to a level that was completely out of control. Rufus looks out at the massive crowd gathered at the bathhouse, thinking about how much things have escalated while Tia complains that he's making her work too hard. He is summoned to the throne room to answer for all the commotion. The scene shifts to the exterior of the grand castle. The king tells his son that he is standing out far too much for his own good. The king says that surely Rufus knows what he is about to say, and Rufus hangs his head and apologizes. Even Ragios admits that he never expected things to become this lively and that he has no words to offer in their defense. The king sighs with exasperation, remembering the day Rufus first inherited the summoning skill. He orders Rufus to stop producing the hot spring water immediately, much to Rufus's relief. The king says that he will be the one to deliver the bad news to the queen, Milia. As Rufus turns to leave, the king stops him, saying there is one more matter to discuss. The king steeples his fingers, considering his words carefully. He tells Rufus that he has grown up now, and that the timing is right for the next step in his life. He looks his son in the eye and orders him to get married. Rufus stands before the throne, stunned as he questions his father's command to get married. He internally panics, thinking that at only 7 years old, it's far too soon for marriage and that he'd only be an elementary school student in his previous life. The king clarifies that it isn't an immediate order but is about having the proper mindset as a member of the Elidorian royal family, which only confuses Rufus further. Rufus internally scoffs at the idea, remembering he was unmarried in his past life and doesn't feel any real sense of urgency about it now. His mind whirls as he considers the concept of marriage, quickly realizing that for a member of the royal family, it would inevitably be a political arrangement. He reminds himself that before any of that, he has the important mission of spreading the summoning skill throughout the world, snapping back to attention when his father asks if he is listening. As the conversation ends, his thoughts drift to how hungry he is, and he wonders if he might be able to get a snack from the kitchen. His stomach audibly rumbles. The thought of food suddenly sparks a new idea in his mind. He asks Ragios if magical creatures need to eat, and his companion replies that it is not particularly necessary for them. Rufus thinks about how fun it would be to have an outdoor barbecue with all of his companions and decides he should ask the head chef about it. He muses that if he had summoned his creatures while imagining them eating together, it would have added a new dimension to the enjoyment of food. When he finds the head chef, he asks about having a barbecue, but the chef has never heard the term before and asks what it is. Rufus is shocked to learn that the concept of a barbecue does not seem to exist in this world, a fact the chef confirms. The chef explains that cooking outdoors is considered too dangerous and is therefore not permitted. Rufus eagerly explains that he means grilling meat and vegetables on a wire rack, and the chef acknowledges that such dishes exist. However, the chef elaborates that the danger lies in the possibility of the food being poisoned, a thought that horrifies Rufus. Changing tactics, Rufus asks what kind of dishes are cooked on a griddle, and the chef confirms that they use iron plates for cooking. Rufus grimaces, realizing that the threat of assassination attempts is a genuine and serious concern in this world. The chef thinks for a moment. He suggests baked goods like cookies, an idea that brightens Rufus's mood. The chef then apologetically informs Rufus that animals are not allowed in the kitchen, and Rufus quickly apologizes for bringing Ragios inside. Walking away from the kitchen, Rufus reflects on the fact that this world seems to have a significant lack of sweet treats. He fondly remembers all the different kinds of sweets from his time on Earth, such as cream puffs, dango, pudding, and bomkachin. He thinks back on the incredible variety of sweets that were readily available in his past life. His stomach rumbles again as he daydreams about the countless delicious treats he used to enjoy. An establishing shot shows the doors to the Summoners Guild. Back at the guild, an idea strikes him, and he summons a new magical creature, a tall robot wearing a chef's hat, the Tetsujin chef. Selbus asks if the creature is a golem, and the robot confirms that it is an iron golem. Selbus marvels at the sight, amazed by the idea of a magical creature specifically created for cooking. Rufus officially gives the iron golem its new name, Tetsujin. Tetsujin whirs, processing its new name. The robot chef jots down a note, preparing for its first order. Rufus asks Tetsujin to make some pudding as a trial run. The robot produces a list, reporting that it does not have the necessary ingredients or cooking utensils for the task. Rufus hands the list to an attendant named Ray, asking him to retrieve the items from the kitchen, and Ray immediately agrees. To acquire the missing cooking equipment, Rufus summons Torachan. He asks the treasure box if it contains an oven, describing it as a device that can bake or steam food using an internal heat source. Thinking Torachan understands, he excitedly tells it to produce the item. Torachan promptly spits out a modern-looking microwave oven. Rufus observes that it looks almost identical to a toaster oven and wonders if the method of use is also similar. He tries to read the text on the machine's control panel but finds it's written in an indecipherable ancient language. He then asks Torachan if it has an instruction manual for the strange device, and the box produces a small booklet. Rufus attempts to read the manual himself, but the ancient script is still completely unreadable to him. He asks Ragios if it can decipher the text, but his companion admits that it cannot read the language either. To his surprise, Torachan begins reading the first line of the manual aloud. First, please confirm that the magic crystal is charged with magical power. Rufus is impressed that Torachan can read the ancient language, and the box boasts that it's no problem at all. Torachan continues reading, explaining that the crystal must be replaced when its color fades, but when Rufus asks about a charger, it confirms there isn't one, shocking him. Rufus examines the magic crystal, realizing it's the same type that powered the blower box, and wonders if this one still has a charge. Torachan casually announces that it has more spare magic crystals than it knows what to do with, which shocks Rufus yet again. Just then, Ray returns carrying a large crate filled with all the ingredients requested from the kitchen. Rufus thanks Ray and asks if the head chef said anything, and Ray replies that he simply told the chef that Prince Rufus was attempting to create something called pudding. With all the necessary components finally assembled, Rufus enthusiastically tells Tetsujin to begin making the pudding. He watches in utter amazement as the robot works with incredible speed, its movements so fast that he can't even follow what it's doing. Tetsujin moves in a blur of hyper-efficient motion, mixing and preparing the ingredients. Lala asks if pudding is a type of warm food, but Rufus explains that it's a dish that needs to be chilled until it becomes firm. The freshly made pudding is still warm from the cooking process. Rufus realizes that all they need now is a way to chill the dessert, thinking that while cold magic would work, it would be difficult to maintain a perfectly constant temperature. He turns to Tora-chan and asks if it can produce a refrigerator. When Tora-chan seems confused by the term, he describes it as a box that is filled with cold air. Tora-chan triumphantly produces a large, modern-style refrigerator, presenting it as a small ice room. Rufus is amazed that Tora-chan actually possessed such an advanced piece of technology. He looks at the appliance, thinking that no matter how you look at it, it is unmistakably a refrigerator. The group then begins the waiting process for the pudding to chill. Selbus, Rufus, Lala, and their companions wait patiently. Time passes. Rufus opens the refrigerator door with a click. He thinks to himself that the pudding should be perfectly chilled by now. Inside, he finds several cups of perfectly set, delicious-looking pudding waiting on the shelves. He takes his very first bite. He decides to try one to see how Tetsujin's creation turned out. The sweet, cool flavor instantly washes over him. His eyes light up with pure delight. He exclaims that it is absolutely delicious. He tells the others that this is the exact taste he remembers from his past life as he offers a cup to Lala. Lala and Selbus try the pudding for the first time, and they are both amazed by the sweet, cool, and jiggly texture, a culinary experience completely new to them. Rufus then offers a spoonful to Ragios. Ragios nervously swallows the bite of pudding. He chews thoughtfully, his expression unreadable for a moment. He quickly eats another bite. Ragios declares that pudding is an incredibly delicious food. He admits that until this very moment, he had never held any interest whatsoever in the concept of eating. Seeing the newfound joy in his companion's eyes, Rufus can't help but smile warmly. Rufus reflects that even though his magical creatures do not need to eat, the pudding has clearly become a favorite luxury for them. He suddenly gets an idea for a natural way to introduce the new dessert to others. He decides he wants his father and mother to try the pudding as well, but he worries they might not eat it if he simply offers it to them out of the blue. The scene shifts to the royal family's dining room during dinner. A servant announces that dessert is now being served. The queen remarks on how delicious the meal was that evening. A plate with a single, perfectly formed pudding is placed on the table. Rufus internally celebrates his plan, having secretly asked the head chef to prepare the pudding using the exact same recipe. The queen looks at the dessert with curiosity, saying that she has never seen it before. The head chef formally introduces the dessert, telling her that it is called pudding. The chef then proudly explains to the queen that it was the third prince, Rufus, who taught him the recipe. Rufus panics, realizing in his excitement that he forgot to tell the head chef to keep the origin of the recipe a secret. His father glares at him from across the table and ominously says his name, as if to say, "You again?" Rufus quickly tries to deflect, claiming that it wasn't he who taught the chef, but rather the Tetsujin chef that he summoned. In a desperate attempt to prove his point, he shouts for his robot chef to appear. His father questions the name, Tetsujin, as Rufus continues to shout for his summon to come forth. The robot chef suddenly crashes down from the ceiling with a loud metallic clang. It lands with a heavy thud in the middle of the dining room. Rufus nervously wonders if the robot has entered its destroy mode, as his father tells him to calm down. A tense moment hangs in the air. The queen faints from the sheer shock of a giant golem suddenly appearing before her. The pudding sits on the table, temporarily forgotten in the midst of the chaos. The king stares intently at the dessert on his plate. After taking a bite, he declares that it is delicious. He takes another spoonful. He continues to eat the pudding. Gilliam, who has also tried the dessert, is amazed by the taste and remarks that he can't believe he is actually eating something that ancient people used to enjoy. Rufus asks his older brother Gilliam if he knew what pudding was, and Gilliam confirms that he knew of it by name and description from his studies, but had never tasted it before. The queen begins to stir, wondering if she really saw a golem or if it was just her imagination. Leonard rushes to his mother's side, calling out her name in concern. Rufus nervously explains that he has returned the robot to its normal mode and formally introduces his Tetsujin chef. Tetsujin lets off a puff of steam. The The family now begins to eat the pudding together. The queen, having recovered and tried the new dessert, also remarks on how truly delicious it is. Gilliam enthusiastically tells his mother how wonderful he thinks pudding is. Leonard and the king are also visibly surprised by how good the dessert tastes. The queen comments on the soft, melt-in-your-mouth texture, saying that it's a happy taste and feeling. Rufus smiles, feeling that since everyone is enjoying the pudding so much, he has likely been forgiven for all the earlier commotion. His mother then asks him where he is planning to go next, wondering if it's for another inspection. She mentions that she overheard Gilliam and Leonard talking about an upcoming inspection trip. Gilliam confirms that they are scheduled to visit the territory of Duke Flute. Rufus recalls that the Duchy of Flute is one of the kingdom's most important territories. A map is shown, indicating that the House of Duke Flute is one of the 4 great duchies of the Elidorian Kingdom. Leonard explains that as members of the royal family, their visit is intended to boost the morale and political standing of the duchy. Rufus asks if there is some kind of problem in the Duchy of Flute, and Leonard confidentially tells him that their influence seems to have been waning recently. Leonard explains that a direct visit from the royal family will create a lot of buzz and serve as a public display of support for the Duke. He continues, saying that by emphasizing their strong connection to the royal family, it should be easier for the duchy to regain its former power and influence. A quiet moment passes as the political weight of the situation is considered. Rufus thinks about the various problems that could arise for the kingdom if one of the 4 great duchies were to fall from power. He contemplates the situation, lost in thought. A new idea strikes him, one that connects his brother's inspection tour with his own mission to spread the popularity of the summoning skill. He turns and addresses his older brother, Leonard. Leonard asks him what is on his mind. Rufus asks if he can accompany them on their inspection of the duchy. Leonard repeats his younger brother's request to join the inspection, his face a mask of surprise. Gilliam also questions the unexpected request. The queen listens with interest. Leonard asks Rufus if there is a specific reason for his sudden desire to go. Rufus states plainly that he wants to spread the knowledge and popularity of the summoning skill throughout the world. The entire royal family stares at him in stunned silence. The king is the first to break the silence. He thoughtfully considers his youngest son's bold and ambitious declaration. He tells Rufus that he is well aware of how seriously his son considers the potential of the summoning skill. The king acknowledges that it was Rufus's power that revealed the previously unknown usefulness of the skill to everyone in the kingdom. He then adds with a wry smile that Rufus also has a habit of causing a great deal of trouble. The king turns to his other sons and commands them to take Rufus along on the inspection. Rufus looks toward his older brother Leonard, awaiting his response. Leonard accepts the king's command. He states that if it is a royal order, then he will bring Rufus with them on the trip. The king sternly reminds Leonard to keep a very close watch on his younger brother. Leonard places a reassuring hand on Rufus's shoulder and tells him to listen carefully to his instructions during the trip. He gives his younger brother a gentle pat on the head. Rufus agrees enthusiastically. A short time later, the family meeting concludes. Leonard announces that their departure for the Duchy of Flute is scheduled for 1 week from today. The scene shifts to an exterior view of the Grand Royal Castle. He hands Rufus a document detailing the itinerary for the inspection. Leonard explains that the trip is planned to last for 7 days, including travel time, and Rufus realizes with a surge of excitement that this will be his first time ever leaving the royal capital. He eagerly looks over the document. Leonard points out that the paper lists the names of the key figures they will be meeting in the duchy and advises Rufus to memorize at least the most important ones at the top of the list. Rufus reads the heading at the top of the page, Principal Characters of the Duchy of Flute. He thinks to himself that trying to memorize a list of names without any faces to connect them to will be a difficult task. The page is filled with a long list of unfamiliar names. Rufus asks Leonard if he could perhaps provide more detailed information about these important people. Leonard lets out a hearty laugh, pleased by his younger brother's diligent attitude. Rufus internally notes that Leonard seems hesitant to answer, guessing that his brother is also not very good at remembering names and faces and likely doesn't want to be asked for details. He quickly says that it's all right and that he can just ask someone else for the information. He figures that Leonard must be busy with his own preparations for the inspection anyway, and that he still has a full week to study the list. He looks down at the list with determination. The scene transitions to a large, ornate door elsewhere in the castle. He remembers from the itinerary that Leonard is scheduled to observe the knight's training session. He plans out his own schedule for the trip, deciding to tour the Duke's territory while his brothers are busy, and realizing he must learn the names and faces of the local nobility for an upcoming party. As he walks through the castle halls, Selbus greets him and asks if he is heading out somewhere. Rufus informs him that he is on his way to see his older brother, Gilliam. He makes his way through a grand, sunlit colonnade. He arrives at the castle's research wing, a building known as the Feather Palace. The building is an impressive and stately structure. Rufus immediately notices that the atmosphere here is much more formal and serious than that of the Summoners Guild. It has the distinct feel of a vital state facility, and an attendant explains that a wide variety of important research is conducted within its walls. 2 guards stand sentinel before a large, ornate set of double doors. One of the guards recognizes him as the third prince and formally asks him to state his business. Rufus observes that the security here is much tighter than at the guild and announces that he has come to see the first prince, Gilliam. He explains that his purpose is to learn about the key figures of the Duchy of Flute, and the guard says that he will announce his arrival immediately, asking him to wait for a moment. The guard returns shortly after and invites him to enter. He nervously follows the guard inside the grand room. A voice from within welcomes him warmly. He peeks around the corner of the doorway. His brother Gilliam greets him, confirming that he heard Rufus wanted information about the Duchy of Flute before his upcoming inspection trip. Gilliam remarks on how studious his younger brother is and asks him to wait for a moment while he retrieves something. Rufus politely agrees. Gilliam returns with a large, leather-bound book and tells Rufus that he is free to read it as he pleases. Gilliam points to a section of the book, explaining that it details the nobles who are related to the House of Flute. Rufus reads the title on the cover, Character Guide, and thinks to himself that it is a very straightforward and practical name. He opens the book and begins to look through its contents. He flips through the pages. To his delight, he sees that the book includes portraits of each individual, which he notes will make it much easier to learn who they are. He turns another page of the guide. He continues to flip through the book. His eyes stop as they land on one particular entry. He reads the name written next to the portrait, Furia Flute.